Hey everyone, welcome to my another video. Let's see the video.
I hold the course by compass and stopwatch, and the shoreline ahead is not the one on my chart. The orders say land on time, and the tide keeps pushing us sideways into smoke and noise. When the ramp drops, the cove is wrong, and I watch men crowd into stones with nowhere to spread. Afterward, I write bearings and minutes in pencil, because the system will want causes, not faces. The coast stays in my eyes, and it does not move. August 19th, 1942, Northern France. The port of Dieppe sits in a shallow bay, framed by headlands and chalk cliffs. Across the channel, British planners call the operation a raid. Its purpose is limited and practical. Test amphibious methods under fire. Probe German coastal defenses. Gather lessons that maps and staff papers cannot supply. For the crews of landing craft, the task is narrower. Carry men to the right strip of coast. Deliver them on time. Bring them back if they can. In darkness and smoke, a beach is not a name. It is a shape, a line of surf, a change in cliff angle, a gap where a road meets shingle. The story follows the navigation work inside one small craft group. Not generals, not speeches. A coxswain and the men around him, trained to read sea and shoreline. Their part is the final mile that turns planning into contact. The craft is a landing craft assault. A flat-bottomed boat, low in the water when loaded. It carries infantry packed tight, knees against gear, rifles held close. The ramp at the bow is the exit and the vulnerability. If it drops in the wrong place, there is no graceful correction. The craft cannot hide. It can only move, turn, or burn. Before sailing, the routine is steady and impersonal. A fuel checked. Engines run up and listened to, not admired. Compass compared to the ship's standard. A course line drawn with pencil on a damp chart. A simple table of timings copied by hand. Distance, speed, minutes. Tidal stream noted, because it will push even a correct heading off target. A navigation rating keeps the small facts together. He is not a strategist. He is an organizer of bearings and minutes. He knows the shoreline from aerial photos and briefing sketches. He has memorized what the headlands look like in silhouette. He has been told which cove is a trap and which gap is the intended run-in. Around him, the infantry wait in a compressed patience. They have been assigned a beach code and a time. They have been told the plan depends on surprise and speed. They have been told to stay silent on approach. The men who will go first have already removed excess straps. In a landing craft, a loose strap becomes a snag. A snag becomes delay. Delay becomes exposure. The convoy crosses in night conditions. Navigation is meant to be disciplined and simple. Hold station. Keep the assigned speed. Watch the wake of the craft ahead. Avoid lights that could draw coastal guns. Use darkness as cover and accept the cost that darkness brings. The first hours feel like any other movement at sea. Black water, low horizon, occasional phosphorescence at the bow, the smell of fuel and wet canvas. A periodic glance at the compass card, dimly lit and then covered again. The map is not consulted for beauty. It is consulted for survival. The coast of France is approached on schedule. Then the sea begins to complicate the arithmetic. The tidal stream is stronger than predicted. Not dramatic, not a storm, just persistent. A steady sideways pressure that steals yards and then hundreds of yards. The correction is made by habit. A few degrees added to the heading. A few minutes adjusted in the mind. It is still manageable. It is still within the normal margin of a night approach. This is the kind of drift that crews are trained to defeat. Then a new problem intrudes. Not from the shore at first. From the sea. A brief encounter occurs between parts of the force and small German vessels. Confusion spreads faster than any signal lamp can correct. Some craft turn to avoid collision. Some increase speed to clear a perceived threat. Some slow to regain position. The careful spacing begins to loosen. The neat line of approach becomes uneven. In that unevenness, timing fractures. One craft is now ahead of where it should be. Another is behind. A third is off to the side, watching the wrong wake. The navigation rating tries to hold the plan together with small actions. He calls out the minutes remaining. He checks the compass again, then again. He watches for the first dark mass of land to confirm a silhouette. The coxswain keeps his hands steady on the controls. He has done this in exercises. Exercises have markers and safety boats. The French coast tonight has neither. Tonight, the markers are cliffs and gun flashes. The early signs of failure are subtle. A headland is expected at a certain bearing. It appears, but not with the angle that the briefing sketch suggested. The surf line looks thicker than anticipated. The sea seems to be running across the approach instead of into it. That none of these are proof. They are hints. Hints can be ignored when the schedule is tight and the plan is fragile. Hints can also be warnings that save lives. In that moment, they compete. The craft group continues. They must. They have men aboard and a timetable that assumes an orderly arrival. As they draw nearer, the coast resolves into sharper shapes. Chalk cliffs, pale even in low light. Dark cuts where small streams reach the sea. A few buildings set back from the water. The navigation rating searches for the specific confirmation points. A particular bend, a known road line, a distinctive break in the cliff face near the intended beach sector. Smoke begins to appear over the shore. Some of it is intended. Some of it is not. Naval gunfire throws up dust and mist. The first German fire adds its own haze. What should have been a clean silhouette becomes smeared. The plan requires several landings to arrive close together. The defenders must be overloaded. The infantry must move off the beach fast. The craft crews must drop ramps, reverse out, and clear space for the next wave. That sequence depends on being in the right place. A landing craft in the wrong place is not just a navigation error. It is an interference event. It blocks lanes. It steals minutes. It forces other craft to improvise. It draws fire onto areas not prepared for it. The first clear sign comes when the craft turns toward what looks like the proper run-in. The navigation rating expects to see a broad shingle beach opening. Instead, the coast pinches into a narrower indentation, a cove, small, steep-sided, more cliff than beach. It is a place that might look safe at a glance, a pocket that seems to offer shelter from direct fire. But shelters on hostile coasts are often killing bowls. The coxswain hesitates for a fraction of a minute. The sea is pushing. Other craft are near. Orders are to land. The infantry are ready to go. The navigation rating checks the compass bearing to the headland again. He compares the shape ahead with the memory of briefing photos. The smoke makes the comparison uncertain. The cove could be the correct feature seen from the wrong angle, or it could be the wrong feature entirely. In doctrine, the solution is simple. If uncertain, do not commit. Reconfirm. Regain the approach line. But doctrine assumes time. Doctrine assumes space. The raid has neither. The craft continues toward the cove. The ramp is prepared. As the infantry shift forward, boots scraping, metal clinks are muffled by hands. The men are breathing harder now, not from fear alone, but from the effort of holding themselves steady. The shoreline is now close enough to show detail. The shingle is darker than expected. The slope is wrong. The exit routes are not visible. A cliff face rises too near the waterline. There is no obvious path off the beach. The navigation rating speaks to the coxswain in a low, urgent tone. Wrong shape. No road. No gap. The coxswain's eyes are on the water and the black strip of land. He sees the same problem, but he also sees the tactical trap forming. If he pulls away now, the craft will expose its side. If he holds in, the ramp will drop into a confined space. In a confined space, men pile up. In a pile-up, the first burst of fire becomes a massacre. At the first German tracers confirm the defenders have not been surprised. They cut across the water in straight, indifferent lines. Rounds strike the sea with small, hard flashes. The sound arrives a beat later, flat and metallic. A burst hits near the bow. Shingle sprays. The craft is now committed enough that reversing is difficult. The engines can back, but the sea and the confined angle make the stern swing. The coxswain tries to angle away from the cliff face. The bow bumps the shingle. The craft grinds. held by its own weight and the suction of stones and water. This is the moment when planning becomes chaos, because the cove is wrong, and the wrongness is now physical, not a pencil error, a trapped hull. The ramp drops. The infantry surge forward. They expect a broad beach under covering fire. They find a narrow strip with nowhere to spread. Fire concentrates immediately. German positions above the cove have clear angles. They are not shooting at a theoretical landing. They are shooting at a visible choke point. The first men step down and stumble on loose shingle. Some fall because the slope is steeper than anticipated. Others fall because the men in front have stopped, blocked by the cliff and by casualties. In a standard landing, the goal is dispersion. Men fan out, they find cover, they move inland. Here, dispersion is impossible. The cove funnels everyone into the same few yards. Even brave movement becomes congestion. The navigation rating is not an infantryman on paper, but he is on the craft. He sees the error's consequence in seconds. A wrong cove does not forgive, not. The coxswain tries to back the craft off while men are still disembarking. This is dangerous, but leaving the craft beached is worse. A beached craft becomes a target and a barrier. A craft that cannot clear the area will cause more landings to stack up behind it. Machine gun fire rakes the bow. The metal plates ring as rounds hit. Splinters of paint and fragments of fittings fly. The ramp mechanism strains. The bow is a bright reference point for every defender above. The coxswain backs the engines. The craft shudders. It begins to slide. Shingle drags against the hull with a harsh scraping sound. For a moment, the craft is neither afloat nor free. Then the stern swings, pushed by the current that was underestimated earlier. Now the navigation error expands. Because the current that pushed them toward the wrong cove also pushes the craft sideways as it tries to withdraw. The coxswain fights it with rudder and throttle. The craft clears the stones and becomes afloat again, but it is exposed. Its side is presented to the shore for a few long seconds. More rounds strike home. Not all are audible over engines. Some are felt as jolts. A man near the rear compartment drops without drama. There is no time for a ritual of attention. The craft must keep moving. Behind and around them, other craft are arriving. Some are on the correct approach line. Some have seen the same confusing silhouette and begun to drift toward the cove. The wrong cove becomes a magnet, not because it is attractive, but because it is a recognizable shape when smoke obscures everything else. The navigation rating tries to signal. Hand gestures, a lamp briefly shielded, a shout lost in engines. The raid is noisy now. Noise erases subtle corrections. Several craft land in neighboring wrong spots. Men disembark into fire that was not meant for them. They cannot reach their objectives because the terrain does not match the plan. They cannot even find the lanes that were supposed to exist. On the main beaches nearer Dieppe, the larger tragedy unfolds. The shingle is deep, slowing movement. Barbed wire and obstacles force men into exposed lines. German positions are prepared and well sighted. Tanks that were meant to support infantry struggle on the stones and against anti-tank obstacles. But in the cove, the failure is more intimate. A simple navigation slip has turned a craft into a delivery system for defeat. The craft group tries to recover the original landing point, but recovery at this stage is not a neat turn and a second attempt. It is a scramble against time, fire, and damaged coordination. The coxswain steers out of the cove, looking for the next recognizable landmark. The navigation rating returns to the chart, though it is now more symbol than help. Inshore navigation under fire is not chart work. It is pattern recognition in partial visibility. He searches for the headland that should mark the edge of the intended sector. He looks for the line of buildings associated with the town. He tries to estimate drift by the angle of the wake. He knows the tide is still pushing. He knows the smoke is thickening. The craft passes men in the water. Some are swimming, some are clinging to debris, some are too still. As the landing craft crew is trained to keep moving to avoid becoming a target, but they are also trained to pick up survivors when possible. The tension between these two duties is constant and ugly. A brief decision is made to pull one or two men aboard. The craft slows. Hands reach down. A man is hauled in, coughing up salt water, eyes wide and unfocused. He has no clear unit now, only the immediate fact of being alive. The craft cannot linger. Lingering invites concentrated fire. The engines increase again. The navigation rating is now in a state where every correction must be done with imperfect information. The earlier schedule is shattered. The planned sequence of waves is broken. The shore is alarmed and firing. The craft lanes are clogged with wounded, damaged boats and drifting obstacles. In this environment, the doctrine of amphibious landing meets the lived reality of coastal defense. Doctrine speaks of controlled debarkation and rapid movement inland. Reality provides confusion, bottlenecks, and terrain that punishes small mistakes. A cove is not an abstract feature. It is a geometry that favors defenders. The second act of the story is this grinding escalation. Not a single moment of collapse, but repeated strain. Each attempt to rejoin the plan costs something. Time, fuel, men, trust in the briefing. The craft group tries to align with a new approach path. Signals from offshore ships are difficult to interpret amid smoke and noise. Flags and lamps are intermittent. Radio discipline is strained by urgency. Some messages are too late by the time they are received. The navigation rating is forced to use the oldest tools: compass, a stopwatch, eyeballs. He tries to identify the correct beach by the shape of the cliffs and the pattern of fire. Fire becomes a landmark, which is a grim reversal of intent. The coxswain keeps the craft low and moving, avoiding stationary positions. He knows that a craft that stops becomes easy to range. He also knows that moving too fast near shore risks grounding again. Grounding again would repeat the error, with fewer men left to correct it. A nearby craft is hit and begins to burn. Flames on a landing craft do not stay tidy. Fuel and paint feed them. Smoke thickens, adding another layer to the already compromised visibility. The burning craft drifts. Its course now dictated by tide. It becomes an obstacle that other craft must avoid. Avoidance forces deviations. Deviations create more wrong landings. But the wrong cove is no longer a single error. It is part of a system-wide degradation. On board, the navigation rating hears the infantry officer ask briefly where they are. It is not an accusation. It is an attempt to regain orientation. The answer is cautious, not a confident beach code, a best estimate based on land shape and time. That uncertainty affects decisions. If the infantry do not know their location, they cannot adapt their objective routes. If the craft crew cannot confirm location, they cannot provide reliable return trips or resupply points. The raid's premise was controlled experiment. The wrong cove turns it into uncontrolled improvisation. Reports from the shore begin to filter back through fragments. Men pinned, exits blocked, tanks stuck, casualties heavy, requests for evacuation. Evacuation under fire is different from landing. Landing is forward motion into danger. Evacuation is reverse motion in the same danger, often with wounded who cannot help themselves. A craft crew becomes a medical transport without medical equipment. It becomes a lifeboat under machine gun fire. The craft returns toward the beach line to take men off. The coxswain tries to choose a spot with the least direct fire, but there is no safe spot. Even the water is dangerous. Tracer lines skim the surface. Shell splashes erupt near the hull. They approach close enough to see men signaling desperately. Some wave helmets, some use arms. Some simply stand in exposed positions because cover is gone. The craft nudges the shingle again. Not in the cove this time, but still under fire. The ramp goes down. Wounded are dragged aboard. Some can walk with help. Some must be carried. The men doing the carrying are often wounded themselves. Blood darkens wet clothing and mixes with salt water. There is no room to treat them properly. The deck is crowded. The craft must back off quickly before it is destroyed. The engines reverse. The craft pulls away with wounded aboard, while some men on the beach are left behind because time and fire do not allow more. The navigation rating notes the time, almost automatically. He writes it down because writing down time is part of how naval people impose order on disorder. The record will matter later if anyone asks when and where. The record will not bring back the men left on the stones. The turning point of the story is not a hero's charge. It is a quiet realization among the craft crews. The plan is failing in multiple places. As a raid that depends on precise landings cannot survive widespread navigational dislocation and prepared defenses. The wrong cove is emblematic of the whole operation's fragility. As the morning advances, the light improves and makes the situation worse in one respect. Defenders can see more clearly. Landing craft can no longer rely on darkness to soften their outlines. Smoke remains, but smoke does not replace night. It only complicates it. The craft group receives indications that withdrawal is being considered. Not every message is explicit. Some are phrased as "stand by." Some are phrased as "prepare to embark." In amphibious operations, those phrases carry weight. They suggest a shift from assault to extraction. The coxswain does not need to be told what that means. More runs under fire, more wounded, more men trying to reach the waterline, more craft damaged or lost. He checks his craft's condition. Engines still responding, steering functional, bow area peppered with holes and scars, some fittings damaged, but the craft can still move, and movement is life. The navigation rating adjusts his mental map of the coastline. With daylight, he can confirm the earlier mistake. The cove they entered is not the intended landing sector. It is a neighboring indentation that looked similar in smoke and darkness. The tidal stream and disrupted formation carried them into it. The silhouettes that were meant to guide them were degraded by fire and haze. The error is explainable. That does not make it acceptable to the men who died in it. He does not speak in moral terms. He speaks in terms of causes. Cross-current, loss of station, a misidentification of headland. All of these will appear later in reports. But the cost is already written on the deck in blood and seawater. As evacuation continues, an unofficial adjustment emerges. Craft crews begin to prioritize extraction points that are not the planned ones. They do so because the planned ones are saturated with fire or blocked by wrecks. This is not insubordination for its own sake. It is a survival adaptation. If they follow procedure rigidly, they will lose craft and men without improving outcomes. A coxswain chooses a slightly different angle of approach to reduce exposure. A navigation rating calls out a new bearing that keeps them out of a known beaten zone. A crew member suggests using a damaged smoke canister anyway, because any haze is better than none. These are small, unofficial choices. They are also the only kind left that can still save lives. Risk becomes personal in understated ways. A crew member leans out to grab a wounded man and exposes his shoulders to fire. A coxswain holds the craft steady for an extra 5 seconds so one more casualty can be dragged aboard. A navigation rating stays on deck longer than is sensible because he needs to see the shoreline to guide the withdrawal. None of it is framed as bravery in the moment. It is framed as necessity. The consequences of earlier actions now press down. The initial navigational slip into the wrong cove has reduced the number of men who reached their objectives. It has increased casualties early. It has forced craft to spend time extricating themselves rather than delivering later waves cleanly. It has added to the general loss of cohesion. On the shore, At the raid's assault elements are pinned and suffering. Attempts to move inland have largely failed. The port area remains defended. Withdrawals are disorderly and contested. At sea, authority and procedure assert themselves through signals and orders. The decision to withdraw becomes clearer. The tone of communication changes. It is less about objectives. It is more about evacuation and regrouping. For the landing craft crews, withdrawal is not relief. It is the most difficult phase. Men must be brought off a hostile shore while defenders shoot at every craft that approaches. The craft must come close enough to take men aboard. Close enough means within effective small arms range. The craft cannot return fire effectively without compromising its own purpose. It is not a gunboat, it is a carrier. Pushback from institution appears later, and it is quieter than battlefield fire. Questions will be asked about why craft were off course, why timing slipped, why certain units landed scattered, why the wrong cove was used at all. The answers will be technical and procedural. They will not restore the dead. In the immediate moment, the pressure is physical. A craft that has already been hit must still run in again. A crew that has already seen casualties must still focus on bearings and throttle settings. Fatigue erodes judgment. Stress narrows attention. Repeated runs under fire produce mechanical wear and human strain. The craft approaches another extraction point. Men are wading in the shallows, some waist deep. They are using the water as the last route out. Some are carrying wounded over their shoulders. Some are dragging them. Some are trying to keep weapons out of the surf. The ramp drops. The craft takes men in a rush. A few stumble aboard, slipping on wet boards. The crew pulls them in and tries to keep the ramp clear. A wounded man cannot climb. Two others lift him. A burst of fire strikes the ramp and sparks. The men freeze for a fraction of a second, then push forward anyway because freezing is worse. The coxswain backs away again. The craft's stern dips as the engines bite. The craft clears the shingle and turns toward open water. A shell bursts nearby and sends a sheet of water over the bow. Salt spray blinds for an instant. Hands wipe eyes. The coxswain keeps the craft moving by feel as much as sight. In the confusion, a small group of men on board ask where they are headed. Not toward objectives now, toward ships, toward any place that is not the beach. A brief reply comes from someone in the crew. Out, keep low. It is plausible and minimal and contains the whole truth of that phase. As more craft withdraw, the sea becomes crowded with damaged vessels and survivors. Some craft are missing ramps. Some have holes near the waterline and must run carefully to avoid swamping. Some are towing smaller boats or assisting those without propulsion. The wrong cove, now seen in daylight, is still there. A small indentation with steep sides. A place that should never have been used as a primary landing point under fire. It is not uniquely evil. It is simply the wrong geometry for assault. It is a reminder that coastal features have tactical meaning. In later years, amphibious doctrine will evolve to reduce this kind of failure. Better beach intelligence, a more robust navigation aids, improved training and shoreline recognition, beach masters and control craft, redundant signals, more careful integration of tides and currents. Not because theory became clever, because blood forced attention to details that theory had treated as manageable risk. But on August 19th, 1942, those improvements are not available. There is only the immediate job. Bring men off. Keep the craft afloat. Get clear of the coast. The withdrawal continues until the raid is effectively over. Many men do not make it back. Some are killed on the beach. Some drown in the surf. Some are captured when the last craft cannot reach them. The statistics will be recorded later in official terms. Killed, wounded, missing, prisoner. The landing craft crews see only the human form of those categories. As the craft returns toward larger ships offshore, order begins to return in small ways. A wounded man is laid as flat as possible. A blanket is found. A drink of water is offered. A Navy medical attendant on a larger vessel takes over. The craft crew is told to stand by for another run or to refuel. Sometimes there is no time even for that. The navigation rating finally has a moment to look at the chart without spray and gunfire. He traces the approach line they were supposed to hold. He marks the point where the drift likely began. He notes the cove where they grounded. He writes it down because institutions demand a narrative of cause. In the aftermath, blame is rarely assigned cleanly to a single individual. The raid's failure is too broad for that. There are questions about intelligence, fire support, armor, and objectives, as the landing craft navigation error fits into a larger pattern. A plan that demanded precision was executed in conditions that punished minor deviations. The crew's experience becomes part of the lessons, not in a dramatic way, in the language of reports and training notes, coastal recognition under smoke, need for better control of formations, importance of accounting for tidal stream and disruption, hazard of committing to a cove without confirmed exits. Those who survived carried different lessons that are not written down. They remember the sound of shingle under the hull. They remember the ramp dropping into a confined space. They remember men pinned against cliff and stones with no room to move. They remember the moment when the wrong shoreline shape became a death sentence. In later operations, including the great landings that follow, navigational control is treated with a seriousness born of raids like this one. The work of coxswains, navigators, signalmen, and beach control teams becomes recognized as decisive at the margin. Not glamorous, not rhetorical. Decisive because a force can be brave and still be delivered to the wrong place. The men lost at Dieppe are often remembered as infantry and commandos, less often as the craft crews who carried them. But those crews were present at the point where sea meets shingle. They handled the final conversion of orders into geography. When that conversion failed, it failed in yards, not miles. The wrong cove remains a concise example of how amphibious warfare can collapse without adequate navigation redundancy and shoreline control. It is also a reminder that the smallest roles can carry the heaviest consequences. A coxswain's decision to commit or pull away. A navigation ratings call on a silhouette in smoke. A crew's ability to reverse off shingle under fire. These actions do not appear in grand histories with the same clarity as major battles, yet they are the physical truth of landing operations. After the raid, institutional response is mixed. There are inquiries, evaluations, and revisions. There is also silence in certain places, the kind of silence that follows loss when no improvement can be immediate. Some survivors are reassigned. Some return to training roles to pass on hard-earned knowledge. Some are lost later in other operations that benefited from these lessons. The raid at Dieppe is remembered publicly for its high cost and limited gains. But within amphibious planning circles, it is also a case study in how quickly coordination breaks under fire. The wrong cove is one thread in that case study. A navigational slip that did not merely inconvenience a timetable. It turned the shoreline itself into an obstacle and a trap. There is no neat closure for the men who did not return. For the craft crew, the day ends with cleaning, repairs, and debriefing. Salt washed off metal, holes patched if possible, names listed, sometimes without certainty, statements taken, times recorded. A return
Thanks
to
for watching the
routine,
video.
made
If
heavier
you
by
like
memory.
my video,
If this kind of
don't
overlooked
forget to
operational
follow my
detail
video.
matters to you,
Thank you so
support
much.
the
Press
channel
the
by
bell
subscribing
button
for more World War
to
II
have
stories that
the
focus on the people and
next video.
systems usually left out.